Suzume has within it an interesting story structure, both from the perspective of the 3 and 5-act structures. The 3-act structure, basically, is the beginning, middle and end of a story. The beginning is where the characters, setting, journey, themes and everything in between are set up. In the middle, the drama builds, progressing and developing the world, characters and the depth of the story told. The greater the consistency in information provided, the greater the verisimilitude. Critically, here, the protagonists need to be challenged to a degree that come the end of the act, they are at their lowest point. The end is where the lessons are learned, not only by the characters but also the audience. Furthermore, it depicts how the challenges the protagonists face are either overcome or succumbed to, tying up all narrative threads until Hollywood makes a sequel. The 5-act structure functions in a similar manner. The main difference is that there are more steps laid out along the path. While the opening and closing acts behave in a similar manner, the middle consists of acts 2, 3 and 4 as opposed to a singular Act 2. Here, Act 2 is the point where the core characters come to understand their plight to a greater degree. For lack of a better way of saying it,
and the plot thickens!
Act 3 is when the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist is at its peak, leaving the characters at a crossroads and forcing them to face the consequences of their actions. Act 4 is where the characters find themselves at the lowest point in the narrative, where all hope seems lost and soul-searching is required to get everyone back on their feet. Attributing structure to a story may seem to have the effect of making a story formulaic, but if a writer has a deep understanding of it, rather than being set as rules, they instead become
guidelines than actual rules.
For example, in the 3-act structure, Act 2 contains the bulk of the story, showing that the duration of each act is not spread evenly. Rather, each one is as long as it needs to be for the story beats to be fulfilled before transitioning acts. This allows for greater potential in artistic expression and narrative flexibility. Ultimately, what matters most is the quality of their implementation. When looking at Suzume through the 3-act structure, there are 2 act breaks that help the narrative shift from one to the next. The first is at 23 minutes, when Suzume boards the ferry that takes her away from home in search of Daijin while closing any gates along the way. The second is at 1 hour and 19 minutes, where she goes back to her childhood town to save Sota. Each point portrays major choices made by the character, changes in location, and goals. An additional dimension is presented in the form of what Suzume wears. During Act 1, at the start of her journey, she is wearing her regular school uniform. With each new location, due to the different people she meets in her journey, her clothing changes as if carrying the blessings of those who helped along the way. By the end of Act 2, her costume is completely broken down, needing to revert to who she was at the start of the film, almost as if to suggest that she has to start a new journey, this time while wearing Sota's shoes. While prior her goal was to help all manner of different people along the way, now her journey is simply to help Sota. Looking at the film through the 5-act structure, the points where the act breaks are found are as follows: 23 minutes, 39 minutes, 56 minutes and finally at 1 hour and 19 minutes. While Acts 1 and 5 remain the same as they were in the 3-act structure, Acts 2, 3 and 4 provide additional signposts for the story to progress organically, adding 2 more dimensions. Those being that in each act there are both a new location and a worm trying to escape. To break down the film once more with this structure, the first worm arrives at a point where Suzume is at her most uncertain and reluctant to go off on her journey, while being hindered by the memories of her past. The second comes when things are becoming far more complicated, where she has to figure out how to navigate the situation with her aunt, Daijin, Sota, and the worms simultaneously. The third worm is at a point where her emotions are at a peak, wishing to go to the place where she could be with her mother once more, only to be pulled back to the world of the living by Sota. The fourth worm brings her to the lowest point, taking away all the armor she had built up along her journey and claiming her companion. The fifth confrontation completes her evolution as a character, allowing her to let go of the past she is bound by and look to the future, saving Sota's life and sealing the worms with the keystones in the process. The worms themselves are curious. If we break down each act into 5 scenes, the worms are placed where the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist is at its peak. What becomes quite noticeable is that the 5-act structure is a variation of the 3-act structure, only far more detailed, and this film does a fantastic job of illustrating that point.